We've got some absolutely fascinating Dave Rubin, Tim Pool content to look at here. So one thing I'll give Tim Pool some credit for is, the way he conducts the interview is a little bit hacky at times, but at least he's asking the questions. I can appreciate that. But super, super, very, it tells us a lot about Dave Rubin, what we're going to be looking at here. Already did a clip on this. We're doing another one now, and then we'll probably even do more in the future because this is a pretty long interview, and there really is a lot of information from Dave Rubin here that we're going to look at. So in this video, we're going to look at, he actually admits to being a right-winger. So he has for the longest time claimed that he's the last liberal. He sold merchandise that I think was like Star Wars themed or something because he's a Star Wars nerd, but he says that he's the last liberal while also saying that he's left the left, which those two don't coincide. And I've seen a lot of idiots who support him be like, no, dude, him and Jordan Peterson are center. I responded to someone on Twitter who's saying that garbage, which is hilarious because Dave Rubin is actually in reality a far-right lunatic in terms of economic policy. And we'll get into that in a second. So what we're going to look at here in this first clip, Tim Pool is actually going to ask a very interesting question. He's going to ask him about basically whether or not his show has become stale and just filled with repetitive talk about quote-unquote the regressive left. Check it out.
But whatever. So someone recently reached out to me and said they were a big fan of yours, but they felt like your newer episodes started focusing too heavily on the regressive left, social justice issues. My personal opinion, I feel like you've been attacked by a lot of these people to such an extreme degree, they've actually stolen some of your focus. So, what do you think?
Well, I like what I'm doing, and a lot of other people like what I'm doing, so if this person doesn't like it, I mean, ironically, I don't remember the last time I said regressive left, the phrase regressive left.
There's that cartoon
I said it, and I first off, I love that Freedom Tunes thing, because it's like, wow, the fact that I created something here that is so memeable and that people are so interested that a mockumentary of it basically can get like 1 million views is pretty awesome. When I go to colleges and kids come up to me and they're like, Dave, I agree, and I'm like, wow, that's how cool. Like I've hit a level where people are doing parodies of me. That's actually cool. So I'm very happy with what I'm doing. I would say, if people don't like it, then don't watch. But every week I do something that I think is interesting and relevant, and it's like, just even what we just did right now. Until yesterday, when I was literally sitting in the parking lot at Petco, I didn't know you were going to be on Rogan, and I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to talk to you about today. But I had a general thing.
We did talk about the regressive left. We didn't say regressive.
We didn't. Yeah, but a lot of the frustrations that I think, well, certainly that I have, but I think that you have, and that many people have, are with what has happened to the left. That good liberals, I mean good, decent liberals who want to live and let live, have been purged from their party. If you don't think that's worth talking about, that's not on me. I happen to think it's something worth talking about. I happen to think it's the biggest threat to Western civilization that exists. I think identity politics is the biggest danger to a Western society. The ideas of identity politics and what radical leftism has become, that we would look at each other and judge each other on these immutable characteristics, is the reverse of the American experiment. I happen to think that's something worth talking about. So if someone thinks I talk about it too much, I don't really think I do, but you don't have to watch. It's all good.
Right. I self-reflect, and I've said to...
And by the way, if you thought that of me, I would still be okay with that. I would take that in
I'm a neutral centrist.
Well, but you're someone I respect. So if you were like, Dave, I watched your last 10 episodes, and you seem like you're off the whatever, and you had the wherewithal to say that to me, I would take that in and think about it. I happen to think that believe me, I'm reflective enough of this stuff.
I'll say this about myself too, because people they say Tim Pool's red pilled and all that stuff, and I'll say, listen, I just talk about what I care about.
Yeah.
I read the news every day. I see a story. I want to talk about it. I think it's important, and I think you hit the nail on the head. If you don't like it, don't watch it. And it's crazy to me that people are like, Tim. My mom was like, will you criticize some Republicans? And I was like, Mom, I don't care about the moderate Republicans or Democrats. Yeah. They're doing boring stuff.
All right, so that was quite a bit to consume there. But look, so in the beginning, Tim Toole is basically, hackily giving a defense, right when he asked the question. He's like, oh, well, the way I would frame it right after he asked the question is like, oh, well, I think that, they're so crazy that they've sucked up so much of your focus, which is like, bro, why are you giving him a blowy? Like, answer the question straight up. Stop trying to give a dumb apologetic stance to it. and that, that's what he's doing. And then they bring up the meme of Dave Rubin. Remember the Freedom Tunes video? That's really funny, by the way, where Freedom Tunes makes fun of Dave Rubin, where, Dave Rubin agrees with everyone he has on as a guest, and he doesn't actually add anything. And so that was one of the memes, as well as the regressive left, where he just keeps on repeat, like ad nauseum, like a broken recorder, saying the regressive left, just over and over and over again, unintelligibly. And the way he's going about it is like, oh, that's a cool thing. How's that a good thing? That's actually not a good meme of yours. There are plenty of funny, good memes. That's not one, dude, because that's indicative of your show. So that's actually indicative of your show being basically, ad nauseum garbage of just saying regressive left over and over again, and just agreeing with your guests regardless of what they say. You know what I'm saying? So I think he does that to live with himself, obviously, because I know that's tough to do when you're so morally and ethically bankrupt and a sellout. But come on, dude, are you kidding me? That's not a good thing. The meme is totally, exposing the truth about your entire show. That's a terrible, a terrible, terrible situation to be happy about. So, and then what we have is, remember when Tim Pool then says, he goes basically if you don't like it, don't watch it. That's what Dave Rubin says. And Dave Rubin has said this a lot. Remember when I did that Dave Rubin meme video of Sam Cedar where the dude sends the super chat and Dave Rubin is like, he's like, oh, if you're watching this and you don't like me, what are you doing, man? Stop wasting your time. Watch something else. See how he's presented with constructive criticism, extremely constructive criticism. This constructive criticism is a question of, yo, dog, Donald Trump is the president, yet you continuously go after, quote unquote, the regressive left. What's up with that? You do that ad nauseum, and that seems to be indicative of your show, and it's getting really bad. And notice how his response is, if you don't like it, don't watch it. You know why? It's because he can't respond to constructive criticism. The guy is a complete clown, and that's his response. So how can you have, somebody, and laughably so, it was either in this clip or the next clip I'm going to show you guys in a bit, where he goes, the left has never had a moment of introspection. Yet, doofus, you don't do any of that for your own show. And, people are presenting that's constructive criticism that your buddy, your butt buddy, basically, Tim Pool, your opposite, essentially, your yin to your yang, is presenting with constructive criticism. And so that was pretty ridiculous. So, and then remember Tim Pool comes in and goes, we were talking about the regressive left. So what he was talking about is before the show. And that's hilarious too, because it really goes to show you. And then Dave Rubin gets defensive. He's like, oh shoot. He kind of is going in deep. So it just goes to show you how insane this guy is. They're both like this though, by the way. They're both robots who have been programmed to just continuously spew regressive left, radical left, identity politics, etc. It's so annoying. And then he says he literally believes that the left is the biggest danger to Western civilization. And previously he had said in his Reddit AMA that was a total disaster. You guys remember that one, right? He had stated that postmodernism was the biggest danger. When we have Donald Trump as president right now, who tried to kick off, 30 million people off of their own health insurance. There are people who are being kicked off of food stamps right now. There's all these different kinds of things happening. We're having our, global stance being, rocked because we keep pulling out of treaties that we signed prematurely. And we're just doing crazy, our country is not in a good state right now. And so you think that the quote-unquote regressive left, which now all the Democrats have now is the House. Before that, they had no branches. But the left is the biggest danger to Western civilization. Really? That's pretty suspect if you ask me. And then you see Tim Pool. He also tries to save face for himself because he knows that the same criticism that we give to Rave Dubin is amplified for Tim Tool. Because unlike, Rave Dubin, Tim Tool actually tries to pretend like he's he's actually liberal still. Even though we don't even really know what his politics are at this point, because The guy claims to be a lefty, but just constantly shits on the left 24/7, and not even in an honest way. It'd be all right if it was in an honest way, I guess, but it's not even in an honest way. He does these like hack job smear articles basically, and it's basically like Fox News, no different than Fox News in any way. And so he's trying to cover for himself, and trying to say, oh, well, I just find stories that are really interesting and I talk about those. No, you don't. That's not what you do. That's not your point. The reason why you do it is because it brings the green. They say money talks, right? Are you really going to, he did a video saying I donated to Yang and Tulsi. The video has almost more dislikes than likes. Could you imagine if he did that every video? He'd be destroyed. No one would watch his channel. Anyways, so now we're going to look at a clip where he starts talking about how he's a right-winger. Check this out.
So, but that brings me to the next point.
Sure.
That a lot of people say you used to be a progressive, but now you're you're on the right. You moved to the right. And this falls in line with the accusations of you receiving funding from like Koch brothers, which we've beaten to death. But
let me just say one other thing about funding. I don't know that anyone doing anything remotely close to this has ever been more transparent about their funding. You know what I mean? Like, I kept the number that I was getting on Patreon for like 2 years. Almost everyone else in this space shut the number down immediately.
I shut mine down.
Right, so you could see the number of patrons, but you couldn't see the actual number. We left ours up for a tremendous amount of time, for like 90% of the time that I was on Patreon. When we left Patreon, which is just 2 months ago, that was 70% basically of my company's income that I voluntarily left. So I don't know that anyone's being more transparent about money, but I assure you I have never been bought off, and no one has ever told me what to say or anything like that. I'm doing what I think is right.
In terms of, do you think you've drifted more to the right?
Well,
how would you define yourself?
Well, in that I've woken up to what radical leftism is, and if you watch my videos, so you could watch my videos when I started on Aura TV, which was September of 2015, and I still considered myself a progressive and a lefty and that whole thing, and I started talking about what I thought was wrong with the left, and I started talking about labeling everyone, and I kept saying, if we don't stop doing this, you will get the rise of someone like Trump. I was actually extremely anti-Trump at the time, and nobody listened. I mean, they just kept doubling down. There were a million, and they still do, They're in the course of the last 5 years that this thing has taken off. I have never once, and I mean this, never once seen the left as a movement ever take a moment of self-reflection. Every time something happens, they double down and get worse. And then what happens? Well, then good liberals, guys like Brett Weinstein, who has described himself as deeply progressive, who was a progressive his whole life, who left, this isn't even that well known of a story, but he left Yale University because he basically was forced out of the school. I mean, this guy's a lefty. Is he on the left now? I mean, really, with what the left is in terms of identity politics? Like, I don't think he's really part of the left now. So if someone wants to say I drifted right, well, look, I mean, we just did this, but I'm gay married, I'm pro-pot, I'm pro-choice, I'm against the death penalty, I'm for dignity with death, I'm for strong public education, I'm for government-funded education. That's something that I think the government should do. But I also happen to be for states' rights. I'm for limited government. Those are things that are thought of as on the right. I'm for individual liberty. So I would say that my version of liberalism is classical liberalism, which is about the individual and basically laissez-faire economics. But I do think there are certain roles for government where maybe a libertarian or people more that consider themselves, ANCAPs or whatever, would say there's no role for that. I do think there's a legitimate role. But, if that means drifting to the right, then okay, sure.
Would you consider yourself now... So classically,
I would consider, you're center right.
Right.
If you have the set of beliefs that I'm talking about often, then I would say you're center right now. And even if you don't really have that set of beliefs, if you basically believe in freedom, if you basically believe you should keep as much as you earn, keep a good amount of what you earn, and that it's your money and your life and your adventure and all of those things, well, then you're basically on the center right now. And I would say there's a great, interesting coalition of conservatives and libertarians and classical liberals and disaffected lefties who I see this in the real world. I mean, I just did a year-long tour with Jordan Peterson. So I saw this in Denmark, and I saw it in Sweden, and I saw it in Canada, and I saw it in Australia, of people that are all sort of right-ish, but that disagree on abortion per se, and disagree on some degree of taxes and a bunch of other stuff. But they're all kind of center-right, and it's a rich, diverse place to battle ideas. And all that they're really doing, what unites them more than anything else, it's that 8% you talked about in the interview.
Oh, the progressive.
The radical left progressives,
I'm center-left.
So Tim Pool starts off the question basically saying, like, we talked about earlier how, there's the accusation of you getting funding from the Koch brothers. Of course, he is getting funding from the Koch brothers, no matter how he denies it. And by the way, his denial is very reminiscent of the Man Ray Patrick wallet episode, where he basically agrees with everything except for the conclusion, which doesn't make any sense. He's like, yeah, I did get money from this nonprofit that's funded by the Koch brothers. He's like, he literally said he got a list of guests that he brought on his show that were given to him by Learn Liberty, which is like, whoa, dude, you uncovered information that furthers the case against you for being a sellout. It's like, what are you doing? And then he talks about transparency. You want to be transparent, Rave? Tell us how much you made with the Ayn Rand Institute partnership. Tell us. You did a 4-episode series. I know they gave you a lot of cash, because otherwise, why would you do it? You wouldn't want to risk or jeopardize further, lessening the image of the show in terms of it being ethical and legit. I'm sure it's fat amounts. I know you love money. Money, cash rules everything around you. You love that cash. You'll flip your political positions for money, dude. So I want to know, how much did you make? Tell us how much the ma'am that you were getting money from would Learn Liberty. Tell us. Go ahead. Let us know. We want to know. You really want to be transparent. And also, is it really a good argument to be like, I left my Patreon open for 70% and then closed it? Why did you hide it? Why did you hide it at all? So I don't even get the point of him trying to be like, yeah, we're transparent. Like, okay, you want to be transparent, you don't got to tell us, you don't got to tell us your ad revenue. Tell us how much you're making through these partnerships. I mean, I'd love to know. You want to be so transparent with us? Tell us. I would love to know how much money you're making from that partnership with the Ayn Rand Institute. Honestly, I would. And as I mentioned earlier, he's a robotic machine who just repeats regressive left at literally anything. So, and then he says, oh yeah, well, I was a liberal who's warning against the identity politics because it would lead to Trump. Are you seriously rationalizing President Donald Trump and the garbage human being that he is because of the quote-unquote regressive left? You have to be a really slimy fuck to do that. And to rationalize and apologize for a Trump presidency, which you never criticize. You never criticize Trump. That neocon hack David Frum was on his show, and that's the most pushback he's ever given with a guest. And that's because David Frum was pushing back on Republicans and Donald Trump. So, number one, you're saying you warned them against that, but now, all of a sudden, you're not even criticizing them. How come? What is that? I don't get that. And then he does this bullshit that really pisses me off. So he lists off these positions to try to pretend that he's left-wing. So again, you can't be a right-winger or a libertarian and also be a liberal. Those things don't coincide, you total moron. And so he goes, I'm gay married. That's not a political position, doofus. And then he says, I'm pro-choice. You backed away from that too, but there's actually an argument for pro-choice on the libertarian side. Ayn Rand, for example, I've seen a video clip of her saying that, I think the verbatim quote is like, if you're anyone who's not a defender of the right of an abortion is not a defender of any rights at all. Then there's the argument, the one that he uses, that, the government, and Tommy Lahren used, I can't have a hypocrisy on the government intervention and whatnot. So that's not even a thing. But pro-choice, that's not a determinant of what your position is. So, and then he says, I'm anti-death penalty. Whoa, dude, that's so crazy. That's totally like a really big statement. And then he says he's for funding public education. No, you're not, dude. Stop lying. You're not even for a minimum wage or a progressive tax. You're a lunatic libertarian. You think I believe that you're even for that? This dude definitely is for privatization of schools. He flips on things every single day. Literally all the time, like he did with pro-choice. He started walking that back too. It's like, bro, what are you doing? But so what do I mean by that? Can you be pro-choice, anti-death penalty, and for funding public schools while also being a right-winger? And, I don't even know if he really believes in funding public schools. But let's say those things were. You could still be for a flat tax. You could still be, for no minimum wage. And you could be for all these other, super right-wing positions. Does that make you a liberal? No, of course not. So it really frustrates me when he tries to list off these bum positions. And remember, by the way, what was included in this list in the past couple years? He used to add in single-payer healthcare, but he no longer includes that because he didn't know what single-payer healthcare was, and he no longer supports it. And that's why I say that's my evidence for him not really supporting funding public schools. And he's like, my liberalism is in the mold of classical liberalism. American liberalism is the antithesis of classical liberalism, dude. Here's the best way to describe American liberalism. American liberalism is best defined by essentially, a emboldening of civil rights, which was going on under the George W. Bush administration with the Patriot Act going down and the stripping of the Fourth Amendment. It's basically best described by an emboldening and embracing civil rights while also advocating increased government intervention into the economy. So that means higher wages. That means, Obamacare, for example, which is actually also a heritage plan, but, a public option, for example, is sort of looked at as a left-wing position, a liberal position. Those kinds of things are what liberalism is. You're not for any of those things. Classical liberalism is an uber laissez-faire ideology. Guys, Herbert Spencer, one of the, first real classical liberals in the context of, like, American policy, when you take out people like John Locke and people way before that, that guy was, he wanted to euthanize the poor because he believed in social Darwinism. These are the monsters that we're talking about here who are classical liberals. Uber laissez-faire. There's no comparison between classical liberalism and American liberalism in any way, shape, or form. And then he says he's basically center-right. At least Tim Toole got him to admit, verbatim that he's right-wing. I'm glad. But the truth is, Rubster, you're a libertarian far-right lunatic. That's what you are. If you don't support a minimum wage existing or a progressive tax, then where are you on the scale? You're far right. That's what you are. You're far right in the direction of economics. And the problem with the Rubster is we don't really know at all times what his positions are. That's the thing. And then he says that, there's this weird coalition between disaffected lefties, centrist, center right-wingers, and libertarians. Let me school you a little bit, all right? I take that back. I don't want to frame it like that. If you are somebody who's a quote-unquote disaffected lefty and you are able to form a coalition with a center right-winger or a classical liberal or a libertarian, you were never left-wing to begin with, okay? Because there's no way in hell I am able to coalesce with a libertarian or a right-winger because I have completely different ideology, just like any liberal would be, okay? Take a liberal who supports a public option. He's not, as far left as I am in supporting a universal Medicare for all system. And that liberal also supports raising the minimum wage, not to $15, but to $12. And, they're about incremental change. So, like, let's make, 2 years of college free or something. Is that person who's a liberal going to be able to mingle with a libertarian or a classical liberal or a centrist, center-right conservative? No. What that means is you were never left-wing to begin with, and you're a far-right hack.